Hello, welcome or welcome back. My name is Ari. Today we're talking about 23 books that I need to read in 2023. Now, if you saw yesterday's video, I did this last year and failed miserably. I think I read like 8 out of the 22 books that I had put on my list. So this year, we're gonna change it up a little bit. I have gone to my want to read shelf on Goodreads and sorted this from like oldest to newest. And the 23 books that I'm putting on this TBR are the 23 oldest books, the 23 books that I've had on my TBR the longest. And if I don't read them by the end of this year, why are they still on my TBR? We're gonna remove them from the TBR. Now, some of these books I own, some of them I don't. If you are desperate for me to read a book, I am more likely to read it if I own it. So all of the books that I do not own are on my Amazon wishlist. If you really want me to read it, leave a comment below. And if you really want me to read it, you can buy it off my Amazon wishlist. At no point at all do I expect anybody to buy me books. But it's out there, it's out in the universe just in cases. So let's just go from my oldest book and move forward. Alright, the oldest book on my TBR is God, A Human History. This is a history of why humans create a god or religion, by Reza Aslan. It's here. It's the oldest book. This needs to get read this year. Next up, I have How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. Definitely need to read this. Like, I read anti-racism books every year. I need to keep it going. This one's been on the list for a while. Next up, The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. This is one that was on there last year that I didn't read. It's on there again. It needs to be read this year. Next up, The Furies by Katie Lowe. This is like unlikable females, boarding school. It's very low rated, but I've been told that I would probably still like it. Next up, The Sin Eater by Megan Capisi. I can't pronounce words. This is like fantasy based on the Catholic religion. People will like ceremoniously eat sin, like take somebody else's sin and eat it. This is like you literally eat somebody's sin. This literalization of like a Catholic practice. I'm not Catholic. I can't speak. My tongue's just getting all twisted. But I've heard good things, so I kind of want to read it. Next up is Howard's End by E.M. Forster. This is a novel, a classic about the codes of conduct and relationships at the turn of the century England. It sounds like right up my alley with like the Regency is kind of silly kind of thing. Next up, this is literally 62 pages long. It's called Microgod by K.R. Martin. This guy's a YouTuber and this was his like debut novella. So I kind of want to read it. Like no one's ever, this is like 162 reads, but it's 62 pages. I can totally get through this. Next up is Moon of the Crested Snow by, I am not going to try to butcher this author's name because I would. This is an indigenous story like from Canada, but I don't really know a lot of details. I just know it's an indigenous story and it's on my list. Next up is Disappearing Earth by Julia Phillips. This is a thriller about 2 girls in Siberia who are kidnapped, which I'm not really big on thrillers, but the location makes this sound like really interesting to me. After that, number 10, Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. This, I think everybody's heard of this book. I'm hit or miss with Riley Sager, but apparently this is his best. So let's find out. Next up is The Kiss of Deception by Mary Pearson. This is young adult royalty fantasy, and I really like that genre, so I want to try this one. Next one up is The Last by Hannah Jameson. This is a thriller, but it's also a dystopian. A guy is away from his family at a conference, and all the major cities in the world are hit with like nuclear explosions or like a nuclear weapon. And I think he's in Switzerland but lives in England, and he's trying to like survive, but also he wants to get back home and see what happened with his wife and kids. I don't know. It not a big on thrillers, but very big on dystopians, so I was kind of interested, but obviously not interested enough to read it right away. After that, I've got Furyborn by Claire Legrand. It's fantasy, like assassin fantasy. Probably some romance. I think it might be YA. A lot of people like this. Will I like it? I don't know. Next up is To Best the Boys by Mary Weber. I haven't heard, like, a lot of people read it when it first came out, and then no one ever talks about it, but like the plot always sounds so interesting. It's like a fantasy thriller, YA, and it's like a society that's just for boys, and this girl's like, no, I'm going to do this. And that's kind of all I know. There's like a game, and it's like Maze Runner, but a girl. After that, I have The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. This is about gerrymandering. Then I have The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackwith. I believe this is like, there's a library in hell that has all the unpublished books, and like characters from the books come alive and try to invade the real world. I could be wrong about that one. Next, I have All Involved by Ryan Gaddis. This is nonfiction about the LA riots in 1993 after the death of Rodney King. Next up, I have The Designs of Lord Randolph Kavanaugh by Stephanie Lawrence. I bought this like for one of the very, very first videos on this channel to like read for a video, and then never ended up making that video, so it's just been sitting on my shelf since then. Then I have Dorothy Must Die by Danielle Page. I bought this again early on in the channel's history. I think at the time that I was reading like Wizard of Oz, and I didn't like Wizard of Oz, and so I like never wanted to read this because I didn't like the Wizard of Oz book. But I mean, like, this is still plastic wrapped, and I've got a 2-book box set. But I have no desire at all to read this. Then I have Kingdom of Souls by Rena Barron. It's like 2 heirs for like magic, but I think only one of them can get the magic, and they're like fighting for it. It's African fantasy, which I love. Next up is another African fantasy, which is Beast Made of Night by Tochi Yamabuchi. It's like mages pull forth sin from people and create monsters from the sin, I believe is the premise of this. Next up is Sleepwalking by Meg Wolitzer. This is dark academia about some girls who are obsessed with like female authors who've committed suicide, I think. And then 23, the final one on this list, I have A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness, which I believe is horror. It's either thriller, horror, fantasy horror maybe. And it's about a kid who like dreams of this monster, and then I think the monster comes to life. Those are the 23 books that I'm either going to read in 2023 or take off of my TBR, because obviously if I don't read them, I'm not that interested. Anyway, see you tomorrow. Bye.